My monitor was flatlining, but the real agony wasn't the heart failure. It was the whisper in my ear. As the machine screamed, my best friend leaned in, her perfume choking me, and thanked me for my life. My fiancé, my career, my penthouse, she had already claimed them all. I died with her triumphant smirk burned into my retinas. But the universe doesn't like a cheater. When I opened my eyes, it was 2 years earlier. And this time, I'm the one holding the matches. The sterile scent of Mount Sinai Hospital, room 412, is something I will never forget. It smelled like industrial bleach, wilted chrysanthemums, and the impending end of my 32 years on Earth. I couldn't move. The illness, a sudden, aggressive deterioration of my respiratory and cardiovascular system that baffled the top specialists in New York, had reduced me to a skeleton tethered to life by plastic tubes and a chorus of beeping monitors. I was drowning in my own body, every breath feeling like shattered glass in my lungs. And then, the heavy wooden door clicked shut. I expected the nurse, or perhaps Dr. Eris Weber, the cardiologist who had spent the last 3 weeks looking at me with profound pity. Instead, the sharp, rhythmic click of stiletto heels echoed against the linoleum. Christian Louboutins. I knew the sound. I bought them for her 30th birthday. Vivienne, my best friend since freshman year at Columbia. We had shared dorms, secrets, and tears. Now, she stood at the foot of my bed, impeccably dressed in a tailored cream trench coat, radiating the kind of vibrant health that felt like a personal insult to my failing organs. The cloying scent of Baccarat Rouge, 540, filled the cramped room, overpowering the bleach. "Oh, Maddie," Vivienne murmured, stepping closer. Her voice was soft, but there was a strange, metallic edge to it. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't stroke my hair. She just stood there, looking down at me like a curator examining an exhibit that was about to be put in storage. I tried to speak, to ask for Liam. My fiancé had been sent to London to finalize a massive acquisition for his hedge fund, a trip Vivienne had insisted he couldn't miss, promising she would stay by my side. A raspy wheeze was all that escaped my dry, cracked lips. "Don't try to talk, sweetie," she cooed, leaning over the metal bed rail. The mask of the concerned best friend melted away, replaced by a cold, calculating smirk that chilled me deeper than the IV fluids. "Save your energy. You don't have much left." I blinked, confused. The heart monitor picked up its tempo, a frantic beep, 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 betraying my rising panic. "Liam isn't coming back early, Maddie," she whispered, her lips brushing my ear. "He thinks you're stabilizing. I texted him from your phone an hour ago. He's not even at the Dorchester, actually. He's at the townhouse in Chelsea, the one we closed on last week." My eyes widened. The monitor screamed louder. "We?" Vivienne chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You always were so focused on your blueprints, your designs. You spent 80 hours a week building the Sapphire Resort project for Benson and Carter, making sure every marble slab in Dubai was perfect. You never looked up to see what was happening right in your own living room." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her trench coat pocket. It was the letterhead from my firm. "They promoted me yesterday," she said casually, examining her flawless French manicure. "Senior partner. They loved the sapphire designs. Well, my designs. It was so easy to swap the USB drives when you were rushing to the ER that first night. You were too busy coughing up blood to notice. Richard Benson thinks I'm a visionary." A tear slipped down my temple, hot and stinging. It wasn't just my fiancé. She had taken my life's work, the project I had bled for over 3 years. "I didn't poison you," if that's what you're thinking, she said, catching my gaze. I'm not a murderer, Maddie. I just saw an opportunity. When you got sick, I just realized how much easier my life would be if you didn't get better. I may have tossed those experimental beta blockers Dr. Weber prescribed down the sink. Placebos are so much cheaper anyway. My lungs seized. The monitor shifted from a frantic rhythm to a long, continuous wail. No. Thank you, Maddie, Vivian said, stepping back and adjusting her lapels, completely unfazed by the alarm. For the career, for the ring, for Liam. You set the table perfectly. I'm just sitting down to eat. The edges of my vision turned black. The wailing of the machine grew distant. The last thing I saw was Vivian checking her reflection in the dark glass of the hospital window, fixing her lipstick as nurses rushed down the hall. Then, there was nothing. I gasped, my spine arching off the mattress as my lungs desperately pulled in a massive, unobstructed gulp of air. I shot up, my hands flying to my throat, to my chest. No plastic tubes, no wires, no agonizing pressure. My heart was beating like a war drum, but it was strong, healthy. I was soaked in cold sweat, tangled in the heavy Egyptian cotton sheets of my bed. But it wasn't the sterile hospital bed. I looked around wildly. Exposed brick walls, high industrial windows overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, the soft hum of the city filtering through the glass. This was my old loft in Brooklyn Heights, the one I had sold 18 months ago when Liam and I moved in together. What? My voice was a hoarse whisper, but it was mine. I threw the covers off, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My limbs felt light, buzzing with an energy I hadn't felt in months. I stumbled to the bathroom, slapping the light switch. I stared into the vanity mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the hollowed-out ghost from room 412. My cheeks were flushed, my collarbones didn't jut out like sharp blades, and my eyes were bright and clear. My phone buzzed on the granite counter. I flinched, staring at it like it was a live grenade. Slowly, I picked it up. Tuesday, October 14th. Time, 6:30 a.m. My thumb trembled as I unlocked the screen and checked the year, 2024. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the sink. 2 years. I had traveled back exactly 2 years. My knees gave out, and I sank to the cool hexagon tile floor, burying my face in my hands. The memories hit me like a freight train. The betrayal, the agonizing pain, Vivian's smirk, the flat line. I sobbed, shaking violently as the trauma of my own death washed over me. But as the tears flowed, the despair began to harden. The sorrow crystallized into something sharp, cold, and heavy in my chest. October 14th, 2024. I knew this date. It was etched into my memory as the catalyst for everything. Today was the day of the preliminary pitch for the Waldorf Astoria renovation, the project that would ultimately secure my promotion to lead architect at Benson & Carter. And tonight was the firm's annual autumn gala at the Pierre Hotel. More importantly, tonight was the night Vivian officially met Liam Caldwell. In my past life, Vivian had shown up at my apartment this very morning, crying about a stain on her dress, begging to borrow my vintage red Carolina Herrera gown. I had let her take it. Later at the office, she had accidentally spilled a scalding venti macchiato over my open laptop just an hour before the Waldorf pitch. I had been forced to use her laptop and her haphazardly compiled backup files, which made me look disorganized and panicked in front of Richard Benson. And at the gala that evening, while I was stressed and hiding in the corner, Vivian, wearing my striking red dress, had quite literally bumped into Liam at the bar. She played the charming, clumsy artist. I was introduced to him later as the frazzled best friend. Not this time. I stood up, gripping the edge of the sink. I splashed freezing water on my face, staring into my own eyes. The naive, trusting girl who had bent over backwards for her so-called best friend died in Mount Sinai. I walked into my closet. Instead of the soft, accommodating beige knit dress I had originally worn that day, I pulled out a tailored charcoal gray pantsuit with severe, sharp shoulders. I paired it with a silk crimson blouse. I pulled my hair back into a tight, unforgiving chignon, applied a bold red lip, and strapped on my highest black pumps. My phone buzzed again. Vivian. Hey, Bestie, emergency! My dry cleaner ruined my navy dress for tonight. Can I please borrow the red Herrera? You're a lifesaver. I'll come by at 7:30 to grab it. XOXO. I stared at the text. The audacity made my blood boil, but I forced my thumb to type a reply. Maddie. So sorry, Viv. I actually lent it to my cousin yesterday. See you at the office. I blocked her number from ringing through and slipped the phone into my leather tote. I grabbed 2 separate USB drives, backing up the Waldorf files, and encrypted both. I slid one into my blazer pocket and the other into a secret zippered compartment in my bag. I was ready for war. The polished mahogany doors of Benson and Carter Associates loomed before me. As I pushed them open, the familiar scent of espresso, high-end plotters, and ambitious panic hit me. 2 years ago, I walked into this space feeling like an imposter. Today, I owned it. Morning, Maddie. The receptionist chirped. Morning, Jess. Hold my calls until after the 10 o'clock pitch, please. I walked straight to my glass-walled office. Before I could even log into my workstation, the door swung open. Vivian walked in, holding 2 massive steaming cups of Starbucks. She looked slightly flustered, probably because her plan to secure my red dress had failed. But her mask of sweet, bubbly concern was firmly in place. Maddie, here you go. Non-fat caramel macchiato, extra hot, just how you like it. She beamed, stepping toward my desk. I watched her eyes flick down to my open laptop. I remembered the trajectory perfectly. She would pretend to trip on the edge of the Persian rug, launching the molten sugar and coffee directly into the keyboard, frying the motherboard instantly. As she took the crucial step, feigning a stumble, her arm went forward. Instead of sitting frozen, I smoothly pushed my rolling chair back, stood up, and snatched the laptop clean off the desk in one fluid motion, holding it safely above my head. Splash! The scalding macchiato erupted across my empty desk, soaking into the leather blotter and splattering violently onto the floor, missing my expensive heels by inches. Vivian gasped, overacting the shock. Oh my God! Maddie, I am so sorry! I tripped! Did it hit your computer? Oh no, the Waldorf files! I slowly lowered my laptop, perfectly dry and humming happily. I looked at her, my face a mask of absolute calm. No, Vivian, it didn't hit the computer, I said, my voice dangerously even. Good thing I have incredibly fast reflexes today. She blinked, staring at the intact laptop, a flicker of genuine panic crossing her meticulously made-up face. I feel terrible. Let me get some paper towels. Don't bother, I said, hitting a button on my desk phone. Facilities will handle it. You should go get ready for the pitch. You're handling the secondary material, right? Make sure your files are in order. She swallowed hard, nodding tightly before backing out of the office. At 10 a.m., Richard Benson and David Carter sat at the head of the long conference table. Vivian sat to my right, looking uncharacteristically tense. Usually, I would be sweating, fumbling through her backup files, looking incompetent. Instead, I plugged my encrypted USB directly into the projector. The high-resolution, flawlessly rendered 3D models of the Waldorf Astoria lobby illuminated the room. For 45 minutes, I dominated the room. I walked them through the structural reinforcements, the Art Deco restoration, the exact cost analysis. I didn't glance at my notes once. I didn't let Vivian chime in to save me. I owned every square inch of that presentation. When I finished, Richard Benson slowly took off his glasses. "Madeline, that was, quite frankly, a masterclass. This is the caliber of work that redefines a firm." "Thank you, Richard." I smiled warmly. I cast a sideways glance at Vivian. Her jaw was tight, her knuckles white where she gripped her pen. She was seething. The first battle was won, but the evening was the true prize. At 8 p.m., the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of bespoke tuxedos and designer gowns, buzzing with the elite of New York's real estate and finance worlds. I arrived wearing the vintage red Carolina Herrera gown. It hugged my curves perfectly, the silk flowing like liquid fire. When I stepped into the room, heads turned. I scanned the crowd, ignoring the waiters offering champagne. I wasn't here to mingle. I was looking for him. Liam Caldwell. In my previous life, I didn't see him until 10 p.m. By then, Vivian had already spun her web, playing the enchanting, artistic muse. I spotted him near the grand piano. He was tall, devastatingly handsome in a midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo, well, a bespoke Savile Row suit. His dark hair swept back. He was talking to a group of investors, looking slightly bored. I saw a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. Vivian. She was wearing a rather dull navy dress, her back up, and making a beeline toward Liam's group, holding 2 glasses of champagne, no doubt preparing to pull her clumsy routine. Not today. I adjusted my posture and charted an intercept course. I moved through the crowd with purpose, stepping right into Liam's line of sight, just as Vivian was 10 feet away. I didn't bump into him. I didn't spill anything. I simply walked up to the edge of his circle, caught his eye, and offered a confident, striking smile. Liam stopped mid-sentence. His gaze locked onto mine, taking in the red dress, the confidence, the undeniable gravity I was projecting. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he murmured to his investors, stepping away from them and directly into my path, completely blocking Vivian's approach. "I don't believe we've formally met," Liam said, his voice a rich baritone that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "Liam Caldwell." "Madeline Hayes," I replied, extending my hand. His grip was firm, warm. "Benson and Carter. I believe your firm is looking into the Waldorf acquisition." He raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "We are. And you are." "The lead architect on the renovation," I said smoothly, claiming the title I was about to officially receive. Over his shoulder, I saw Vivian standing frozen, holding her 2 glasses of champagne. The look of pure, unadulterated shock and fury on her face was sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. I held her gaze for a split second, giving her a microscopic, victorious smile, before turning my full, dazzling attention back to the man she was supposed to steal from me. The rest of the evening at the Pierre Hotel was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Liam Caldwell, the man whose ring I had worn as I suffocated in a hospital bed in another life, was entirely captivated by me. The chemistry between us wasn't just a spark. It was a roaring inferno, untainted by the exhaustion and illness that had clouded our relationship the first time around. We spoke about the Waldorf project, yes, but also about his childhood in Chicago, his ruthless drive to conquer New York real estate, and our shared disdain for architectural mediocrity. I kept him engaged, my back subtly angled to block the rest of the room. Every time Vivian attempted to orbit our conversation, I shifted, closing the circle. I could practically feel the heat of her glare burning into the exposed silk of my back. "You have a very intense focus, Madeline," Liam noted, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. His eyes, a striking shade of slate gray, studied me with a mix of curiosity and predatory interest. Most people in this room are constantly scanning over my shoulder to see who else they should be networking with. You haven't looked away once. I know exactly what I want in this room, Liam, I replied smoothly, holding his gaze until a faint, knowing smile played on his lips. I don't need to look anywhere else. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vivian finally surrender. She slammed her 2 untouched glasses of champagne onto a passing waiter's tray and stormed out of the ballroom, her navy dress swishing angrily around her ankles. A cold thrill shot through my veins, one piece off the board. The next morning, the atmosphere at Benson and Carter was thick with tension. The official announcement for the lead architect position was imminent. Vivian arrived late, her eyes bloodshot, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced by a brittle, frantic energy. She marched straight into my office and shut the glass door behind her. "What was that last night?" she hissed, her hands slamming flat onto my glass desk. I looked up from my drafting tablet, feigning polite confusion. "What was what, Viv?" "You completely shut me out. I told you I wanted to meet Liam Caldwell. His hedge fund is backing half the commercial developments in Manhattan. I needed that introduction for my portfolio expansion, Maddie." Whoa. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. In my past life, I would have apologized profusely, promised to make it up to her, maybe even set up a private lunch for the 3 of us to appease her. "You didn't ask for an introduction, Vivian," I said calmly. "You were walking around with 2 drinks looking lost. Besides, Liam and I were discussing the Waldorf structural analytics. It wasn't exactly a conversation you could contribute to, considering you struggle with basic load-bearing calculations." Her face went pale, then flushed a furious, mottled red. "Excuse me? I helped you build the initial framework for that pitch." "You compiled the zoning history," I corrected, my voice dropping an octave, losing any trace of warmth. "A task an intern could manage in an afternoon. Do not confuse administrative assistance with architectural design. Now, if you'll excuse me, Richard expects the revised budget projections by noon." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. I had never spoken to her like this. I had never defended my territory. For 10 years, I had been the soft, accommodating buffer to her sharp, demanding edges. "You're acting crazy," she finally spat, backing away. "Ever since yesterday, you've been a total bitch. Don't think I won't remember this." "I sincerely hope you do," I whispered as she yanked the door open and stormed out. I knew Vivian wouldn't just take the insult. She was a creature of spite. By 2 p.m., I received an email from IT. A routine security sweep indicated that someone had attempted to access my secure cloud drive using an old password from 3 months ago. Vivian, she was looking for my final submission files. The Sapphire Resort theft from my past life was clearly not an isolated impulse born of my illness. It was her fundamental strategy. If she couldn't outwork me, she would steal my work and sabotage mine. I smiled, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I created a dummy folder on my local network drive, labeling it Waldorf _ final _ pitch _ M Hayes _ DU _ not _ share. Inside, I placed a beautifully rendered, incredibly detailed 3D walkthrough of the lobby. It looked spectacular to the untrained eye, but buried in the structural blueprints embedded in the file, the specific schematics required for the city's historical preservation board, I altered the load-bearing metrics of the main mezzanine pillars. I changed the steel grade requirements from high tensile to a standard brittle alloy and removed 2 crucial support beams from the digital model. Anyone who presented these blueprints to a structural engineer would be laughed out of the industry and blacklisted for proposing a design that would literally collapse on its guests. I left my computer unlocked and my office door slightly ajar. "Jess!" I called out to the receptionist as I grabbed my purse. "I have a sudden site visit at Hudson Yards. I'll be gone for about an hour." "Got it, Maddie." Tuh. I walked to the elevator, took it down to the lobby, and then slipped into the ground floor coffee shop. I pulled out my tablet, logging into my office's internal security camera feed, a perk I had quietly requested from the building manager years ago after a string of late-night laptop thefts. 10 minutes later, the feed on my screen showed Vivian slipping out of her cubicle. She checked the hallway, then darted into my office. My heart pounded with a dark, vengeful rhythm as I watched her sit in my chair, her hands flying over my mouse. She dragged the dummy file onto a sleek silver flash drive, pocketed it, and hurried out. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now, I just had to wait for her to choke on it. The following week was a whirlwind. Liam and I had gone on 3 dates. They weren't casual coffees. They were intense, electric evenings, dinner at Le Bernardin, a private viewing at the MoMA, and a late-night drive up the Palisades in his Aston Martin. Every moment felt like rewriting a tragedy into a triumph. He was brilliant, ruthless in business, but surprisingly attentive with me. I was careful, though. I didn't let him into my apartment yet. I kept the boundaries firm, letting him chase me, securing my value in his eyes. Vivian, meanwhile, was growing desperate. The official promotion to lead architect still hadn't been announced. Richard Benson was taking his time, claiming he wanted one final review of all internal candidates' portfolios. I knew exactly what Vivian was doing. She was using my sabotaged Waldorf files to secretly court a rival firm, Harrison & Cross, hoping to secure a massive signing bonus and a director title before Benson and Carter could promote me. But Vivian couldn't just focus on her career. She had to destroy my personal life, too. It was a rainy Thursday evening. Liam had asked me to meet him at the St. Regis bar for a drink after work. I arrived 10 minutes early, shaking my umbrella off in the vestibule. As I handed my coat to the cloakroom attendant, I glanced toward the dimly lit mahogany-paneled bar. Sitting on a leather stool, angled perfectly to face the entrance, was Vivian. She was wearing a plunging emerald green dress, her hair blown out into loose, seductive waves, and she was talking to Liam. My breath caught in my throat. For a split second, the ghost of my past life gripped me, the terror of losing him to her again. But then I saw Liam's posture. He wasn't leaning in. He was leaning back, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression polite but unmistakably cold. I didn't rush over. I took a slow, deep breath, smoothing my tailored pencil skirt, and walked toward them with measured, silent steps. "It's just so hard to watch her unravel," Vivian was saying, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. She reached out, her fingertips hovering just an inch from Liam's forearm. "Maddie has always been fragile. The stress of the Waldorf project is breaking her. She's been snapping at everyone in the office, making horrible mistakes on her drafts. I'm just worried she's going to drag the firm down with her, or anyone associated with her. Liam took a slow sip of his scotch. Is that right? I just thought you should know. Vivian sighed, playing the tragic hero. Since you two seem to be spending time together, she tends to latch on to successful men when she's spiraling. She did the same thing with a professor in college. A complete lie. Fascinating, Liam murmured. His eyes flicked past Vivian's shoulder and locked onto mine. The coldness in his gaze vanished, replaced by a dark, amused gleam. Madeline, you're exactly on time. Vivian froze. She whipped around, her carefully constructed mask of pity shattering into sheer panic as she saw me standing less than 2 feet away. Vivian, I said, my voice sweet as poisoned honey. What a coincidence. I didn't realize you frequented the St. Regis. I was just meeting a client, she stammered, sliding off the bar stool, almost twisting her ankle in her stilettos. Liam and I just bumped into each other. A client? In that dress? They must be very important, I observed, letting my eyes rake over her outfit with deliberate disdain. I hope your meeting goes well. Though I'm surprised you have the time, considering Richard expects your final portfolio submission tomorrow morning. She swallowed hard, clutching her designer clutch like a shield. Right. The portfolio. I should get going. She practically bolted toward the exit, leaving a trail of heavy perfume in her wake. I took the stool she had vacated, resting my elbows on the polished wood. She's persistent, I'll give her that, Liam said, signaling the bartender to bring me a glass of Pinot Noir. What else did she say about me? I asked, watching the rain lash against the high windows. That you're incompetent, emotionally unstable, and using me for my money. Liam recounted dryly. He turned to face me fully. Tell me, Madeline, why is your best friend actively trying to assassinate your character? We're not best friends anymore, I said, meeting his gaze. We're competitors. And she realizes she's losing. Liam smiled, a dangerous, thrilling expression. I don't like people who play dirty in the shadows. If she's a problem, I can have her blacklisted from every major real estate developer in the tri-state area by tomorrow morning. The offer was tempting. With one word, Liam could obliterate her. But that was too easy. That wasn't retribution. No, I said softly, tracing the rim of my wineglass. Leave her to me. She's digging her own grave. I just need to make sure she buys the headstone. Friday morning. The boardroom at Benson and Carter was packed. The entire executive team was present, along with the senior partners from Harrison and Cross. I had tipped off Richard Benson earlier in the week that Harrison and Cross was sniffing around our proprietary designs, suggesting we invite them for a collaborative summit to discuss zoning territories. It was a Trojan horse. Vivian sat at the opposite end of the table from me. She looked smug, triumphant. She had formally submitted her resignation an hour ago, effective immediately, citing a superior opportunity. She was wearing a blinding white suit, ready to ascend her throne. Before we discuss territorial boundaries, Arthur Cross, the silver-haired CEO of the rival firm, began. I'd like to officially announce that Vivian here will be joining us as our new director of commercial design. She has brought us a revolutionary proposal for the Waldorf bid. Frankly, Richard, she's outdone anything your firm has produced in a decade. Richard Benson frowned, adjusting his glasses. Is that so? We were under the impression Madeline Hayes was leading the Waldorf initiative. Madeline's concepts were uninspired. Vivian spoke up, her voice ringing with false confidence. She stood up, plugging a silver flash drive into the boardroom projector. My flash drive. the one she stole. I took the liberty of redesigning the lobby and structural framework from scratch. Arthur, if you'll look at the mezzanine schematics, the massive screen flared to life. The gorgeous 3D rendering of the lobby appeared. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the room. Vivian beamed. Then she clicked to the structural blueprints. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hands. Arthur Cross's lead structural engineer, a severely stern woman named Dr. Eris Weber, a name that sent a profound, sickening jolt through my system, reminding me of the cardiologist who had watched me die, squinted at the screen. Dr. Weber pushed her glasses up her nose. "Wait," Dr. Weber commanded, standing up. "Zoom in on section 4B, the primary load-bearing pillars." Vivian obliged, her smile faltering slightly. The room went dead silent. "Are you out of your mind?" Dr. Weber snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. She turned to Arthur Cross, her face pale with outrage. "Arthur, this is a death trap! She specified a low-grade steel alloy for a space designed to hold a marble ceiling and 1,000 occupants. Furthermore, she's completely removed the lateral support beams. If we built this, the entire mezzanine would collapse under its own weight within 6 months. The casualties would be catastrophic." Arthur Cross stared at the screen, then turned a terrifying glare on Vivian. "Is this a joke, Vivian?" "No, I mean, Vivian stammered, the color draining from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. "There must be a mistake in the rendering. A mistake?" Richard Benson thundered, slamming his fist on the table. "You try to poach my employee, Arthur, and she hands you a blueprint for mass murder? Is this the revolutionary design you were bragging about?" "I didn't draw those," Vivian shrieked, pointing a shaking finger directly at me. "Maddie did. I took them from her computer. They're her files." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I stood up slowly, picking up my tablet. I projected my screen alongside hers. "That is a very serious accusation, Vivian," I said, my voice ringing clear and calm through the chaos. "Here are the actual time-stamped files for the Waldorf project, submitted to Richard and the historical board 3 days ago. As you can see, the load-bearing metrics are flawless, utilizing high-tensile titanium alloys and a reinforced crossbeam grid." The engineers in the room nodded in rapid agreement as my pristine blueprints filled the screen. "What Vivian stole," I continued, turning to look directly into her terrified, tear-filled eyes, "was a quarantined simulation file, a digital sandbox I used to test structural failure points. It was clearly labeled in a private, locked folder, which means, Vivian, not only did you commit corporate espionage, but you were too incompetent to understand the blueprints you stole before presenting them to a rival CEO." Arthur Cross stood up, disgusted. "We withdraw our employment offer immediately, and we will be contacting our lawyers regarding the theft of proprietary data, Richard. We want no part of this liability." He stormed out, his team following suit. Vivian was left standing alone at the front of the room, trembling violently. Her career was over. She was blacklisted. She would never work in architecture in New York or anywhere else ever again. "Pack your desk," Richard Benson said coldly, not even looking at her. "Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. Madeline, congratulations on the lead architect position. Let's get to work." As the room cleared, I walked past Vivian. She was sobbing, gripping the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. "You set me up," she choked out, her makeup running down her face in ugly black streaks. "I just gave you the rope, Viv," I whispered, stepping close so only she could hear. "You tied the noose yourself." I walked out of the boardroom, my heart soaring with a vicious, absolute triumph. I had won. I had destroyed her. But as I stepped into the elevator, a sudden brutal wave of dizziness hit me, my vision blurred at the edges. A sharp, stinging pain flared deep in my chest, right behind my sternum. I stumbled, catching myself against the brass handrail. I gasped for air, the scent of industrial bleach suddenly, phantomly filling my nostrils. No, it was 2024. I was healthy. But as I looked at my reflection in the elevator doors, I saw a faint gray pallor creeping into my cheeks. The exact same pallor I had seen in the mirror just before the coughing started in my past life. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Vivian hadn't just watched me die. She hadn't just withheld my medication. The illness wasn't a random act of God. It was a slow-acting poison, and whatever she had done to me, she had already started doing it again. The elevator doors slid open to the ground floor lobby of Benson and Carter, but I barely registered the marble floors or the security guard's polite nod. My ears were ringing. The phantom smell of the hospital, bleach, iodine, and decaying flowers, clung to the inside of my nasal passages. My chest felt tight, a band of cold iron constricting my lungs. She had already started. I practically ran out into the crisp October air, hailing a cab with a shaking hand. I didn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't. If Vivian was poisoning me, the vector was somewhere in my home, in my routine. I directed the driver to a private medical clinic on the Upper East Side, a discreet facility catering to high-net-worth individuals who required absolute confidentiality. My mind raced, tearing through the past few months. In my previous life, the illness had set in slowly. Lethargy first, then a persistent cough, followed by violent migraines, and eventually the catastrophic organ failure that put me in Mount Sinai. Dr. Weber and the specialists had called it an idiopathic autoimmune collapse. They couldn't find a pathogen. They couldn't find a tumor. They never thought to look for an assassin. I paid an exorbitant out-of-pocket fee to see Dr. Gregory Hausman, an elite toxicologist who asked no questions and demanded absolute precision. Blood panels, hair follicle tests, urinalysis. I gave him everything, sitting in the plush, velvet-lined waiting room, shivering not from the AC, but from the terrifying realization of my own vulnerability. I need a heavy metal screen, organic compounds, untraceable botanicals, everything, I had demanded, my voice trembling but fierce. Test for things that mimic autoimmune decay. The wait took 3 agonizing days. I called in sick to the firm, claiming a severe migraine. I stayed in a boutique hotel under an assumed name, drinking only bottled water I purchased myself, eating only sealed, prepackaged food. By the second day, the tightness in my chest began to ease. The faint gray pallor in my cheeks faded back into a healthy flush. When the call finally came, I was sitting by the window, watching the rain slick the Manhattan streets. "Madeline?" Dr. Hausman's voice was grim, devoid of its usual clinical detachment. "We found it. It's a synthetic compound, highly specialized. A derivative of aconitine, wolfsbane, mixed with trace amounts of dimethylmercury. It's designed to be administered in microdoses over a long period. It bypasses standard toxicology screens because the body breaks down the botanical elements rapidly, leaving only the systemic damage. Left unchecked, it induces massive cardiovascular and respiratory failure." I closed my eyes. A single tear escaped, hot and furious. "How is it administered?" "Ingestion," he replied. Given the breakdown rate in your bloodstream, I'd estimate you've been taking it daily for about 6 weeks. If you hadn't stopped exposure 3 days ago, you would have been hospitalized within the month. As it stands, we need to begin chelation therapy immediately to scrub the mercury from your tissues. 6 weeks. My mind snapped back to mid-August. My birthday. Vivian had thrown a small get-together at my apartment. She had given me a gift. A beautifully carved artisanal wooden tea chest from a boutique in Kyoto. Inside were dozens of loose-leaf blends. "You work too hard, Maddie," she had cooed, hugging me tight. "This is a special vitality blend. The herbalist promised it boosts the immune system and reduces stress. You have to drink a cup every morning." I had laughed and promised I would. And like a dutiful, trusting fool, I had brewed a cup of that earthy, slightly bitter tea every single morning before work. She had handed me my own execution in a silk-ribboned box. I thanked the doctor, scheduled the therapy, and hung up. I sat in the silent hotel room, letting the reality of her psychopathy wash over me. She wasn't just an opportunist who took advantage of my sickness in the hospital. She was the architect of it. She had planned my murder with the same meticulous attention to detail I used to design skyscrapers. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person in New York who understood the language of absolute, ruthless destruction. Liam picked up on the second ring. "Madeline, I was starting to wonder if you were avoiding me." "I need your help," I said, my voice eerily calm. "And I need your security team. Vivian is trying to kill me." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. When Liam finally spoke, his rich baritone had dropped an octave, radiating a terrifying, icy menace. "Where are you?" Liam's resources were staggering. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in his sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, wrapped in a cashmere blanket while his private security detail swept my Brooklyn apartment. They wore hazmat suits. They found the Kyoto tea chest exactly where I left it on my kitchen counter. They isolated it, cataloged it, and rushed it to a private lab. By midnight, the results matched Dr. Hausman's blood work perfectly. The vitality blend was laced with enough synthetic aconitine and mercury to kill an elephant, provided it was consumed patiently, sip by poisoned sip. Liam stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the glittering skyline, holding the lab report. He hadn't stopped pacing for 20 minutes. "I can make her disappear," Liam said softly, the reflection of the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't hyperbole. He said it with the casual certainty of a man who could buy and sell entire governments. "A plane ticket, a new identity, or something much more permanent. Say the word, Madeline." "No," I said, stepping up behind him and resting my hand on his back. I could feel the tension coiled in his muscles. If she just disappears, she wins. She escapes accountability. I want her to stand in the light and be utterly destroyed by it. I want her behind bars, knowing I put her there. He turned, his eyes searching my face. He saw the cold, unyielding resolve there. He reached out, his thumb gently tracing my jawline. "What's the play, architect?" "We build a trap," I said, a dark smile playing on my lips. "And I have to be the bait." The next phase required a performance worthy of an Oscar. I returned to my apartment, now completely sterilized by Liam's team, but with the tea chest carefully returned to its place on the counter, filled with harmless, identical-looking matcha powder. Hidden cameras, no larger than pinheads, were installed in every room, feeding directly to a secure server monitored by Liam's security chief and a contact at the NYPD who owed Liam a massive favor. Then, I reached out to Vivian. She had been silent since the boardroom disaster, blacklisted from the industry, humiliated, and likely terrified of legal retaliation from Harrison and Cross. I sent her a text, my hands shaking with anticipated adrenaline. Maddie. Viv. Please. I know things ended horribly, but I'm so sick. I don't know what's happening to me. I can barely stand up. I'm scared. Please come over. It took 3 hours for her to reply. Vivienne. I'm on my way. I spent those 3 hours applying theatrical makeup I had ordered online. I hollowed out my cheeks with gray contour, painted deep purple bags under my eyes, and used a sheer white powder to drain the life from my face. I dressed in an oversized, faded nightgown and crawled into bed. I looked exactly like the woman who had died in Mount Sinai. When the front door unlocked, she still had her spare key, of course. My heart hammered against my ribs. Maddie? Her voice echoed in the loft, soft, cautious. I let out a weak, rattling cough. In here. Vivienne appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. The transformation in her was stark. Gone were the tailored designer suits and the arrogant sneer. She looked exhausted, wearing a cheap trench coat and scuffed boots. But as she looked at me, at my pale, decaying form, a spark of vicious, victorious light returned to her eyes. Oh, Maddie, she breathed, walking slowly toward the bed. She didn't look remorseful. She looked relieved. Viv, I gasped, reaching out a trembling, weak hand. I'm so sorry about work. I was just... the stress. My chest hurts so much. It's just like my mom's heart condition. Shh, Vivian cooed, sitting on the edge of the mattress. She patted my hand, her skin cold against mine. Don't worry about the firm. They don't understand us. They never did. Have you been to the doctor? They don't know what it is. I lied, my voice a pathetic whisper. They want to put me in the hospital tomorrow for invasive tests. Viv, I'm so scared. If something happens to me... Nothing is going to happen, she said smoothly, but her eyes darted to my nightstand, scanning my pill bottles. Have you been drinking your tea? The Vitality blend? You need your strength. I ran out. I wheezed. I haven't had it in days. A flash of panic crossed her face, quickly masked by a sweet, predatory smile. Well, that won't do. I actually brought a fresh batch. The herbalist made it extra potent this time. Let me make you a cup. You're so good to me, I whispered, closing my eyes to hide the absolute loathing burning in them. I'm your best friend, Maddie. I'll always take care of you. I listened to her heels click against the hardwood as she walked to the kitchen. On the tablet, hidden beneath my heavy duvet, I watched the live feed from the kitchen camera. Vivian stood by the marble island. She didn't reach for the tea chest I had prepared. Instead, she pulled a small, unmarked glass vial from the pocket of her trench coat. The liquid inside was a sickly, pale yellow. She turned on the kettle. She pulled my favorite ceramic mug from the cabinet, and then, with a steady, practiced hand, she uncorked the vial and poured the entire contents into the mug, followed by a scoop of the harmless tea and boiling water. She stirred it slowly, a serene, chilling smile on her face. She was accelerating the timeline. The microdosing wasn't fast enough now that her career was ruined. She needed me dead tonight. Why? The answer clicked in my head. My life insurance policy. Years ago, when we first moved to New York, We had playfully named each other as beneficiaries on small, entry-level policies, promising that if one of us got hit by a taxi, the other would use the money to start a firm. As my salary grew, my policy automatically scaled. I was currently insured for $4 million, and I had never changed the beneficiary. She was going to kill me, collect the payout, and vanish. She walked back into the bedroom, carrying the steaming mug. The scent of earthy matcha masked whatever chemical death she had just poured into it. "Here you go, sweetie," she murmured, bringing the cup to my lips. "Drink up. It will help you sleep." "It smells incredibly strong, Viv," I said, my voice maintaining that frail, trembling whisper. I turned my head away slightly, pulling the heavy down duvet tighter around my chest, as if shivering from a deep, internal cold. "It's concentrated," Vivian insisted. The syrupy, maternal sweetness in her voice suddenly evaporated, replaced by a hard, urgent edge that bordered on frantic. She pressed the thick ceramic rim of the mug against my lower lip. The heat of the liquid radiated against my skin, carrying the earthy, bitter scent of the matcha that masked the chemical death lurking beneath. "You need to drink it, Maddie. All of it. Right now." "Why the sudden rush?" I asked. I didn't cough. I didn't wheeze. I didn't struggle for breath. My voice resonated through the quiet bedroom, clear, sharp, and laced with absolute authority. Vivian froze. The mug hovered in the air between us, a millimeter from my mouth. She looked down at me, her perfectly threaded brow furrowing in profound confusion as she registered the sudden, jarring shift in my tone. The dying girl was gone. "What?" she stammered, blinking rapidly. I slowly pushed the heavy duvet off my body, tossing it aside with an effortless motion. I sat up perfectly straight against the tufted velvet headboard. I looked her dead in the eye, dropping the fragile invalid persona entirely. "I asked why you're in such a desperate rush to have me drink it tonight," I repeated, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I stood up. I was inherently taller than her, and even in my bare feet, staring down at her sitting on the edge of my mattress, the power dynamic in the room shifted so violently, I could almost hear the air crackle with static electricity. "Maddie, what are you doing? You're sick. Lie down." "Whoa," she demanded, her voice spiking an octave into pure panic as she scrambled to her feet to match me. "I'm not sick, Vivian," I said, taking a deliberate, measured step forward. "Not anymore. I stopped drinking your special vitality blend a week ago." The color completely and instantly drained from her face, leaving behind a sickly grayish pallor. The mug in her hand began to tremble violently, tiny droplets of the scalding, poisoned tea splashing over the rim and hitting the hardwood floor with soft, hissing plaps. I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice paper-thin, taking a frantic step backward toward the bedroom door. "Aconitine, mixed with trace amounts of dimethylmercury. It's a very elegant, very lethal cocktail, I'll admit," I said, matching her step for step, slowly backing her out of the bedroom and into the long, dimly lit hallway of my loft. Dr. Gregory Hausman, a toxicologist who costs more per hour than you used to make in a week, was highly impressed by the formulation. "Where did you source it? Did you navigate the dark web? Or did you just find some disgraced, desperate chemist willing to take a few $1,000s from your savings account?" "You're crazy! You're delirious from the fever! You need a hospital!" she screamed, her eyes darting wildly toward the heavy steel front door at the end of the hall. "You truly thought I was blind," I continued, my voice a relentless, rhythmic hammer striking against her crumbling reality. You thought you could steal my blueprints for the Waldorf project. You thought you could steal my promotion. You thought you could steal Liam. And when you spectacularly failed in the boardroom, when you humiliated yourself in front of Arthur Cross and the entire executive team, you decided to just erase me from the board entirely. "Shut up!" she shrieked, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the mug like a makeshift weapon. "You've always had everything. You walked into Benson and Carter, and they treated you like a goddamn architectural prodigy. You barely even had to try, Maddie. I had to claw for every single scrap of recognition, while you just breezed through life. So your solution was to systematically poison your best friend," I stated clearly, ensuring the hidden, high-fidelity microphones embedded in the crown molding picked up every single syllable of her confession. "You were going to kill me, collect the $4 million payout on the life insurance policy I naively left you on, and start over. You deserved it," she spat, completely abandoning any pretense of innocence. Tears of pure, venomous rage streamed down her face, ruining her makeup. "You condescending, arrogant bitch. You set me up today. You took my job. You ruined my entire life. So yes, drink it and die." With a feral, guttural scream, she lunged at me, sweeping her arm in a violent arc, attempting to throw the boiling, poisoned liquid directly into my face. But I was ready. I was faster, fueled by 2 years of suppressed rage and the absolute certainty of my own survival. I sidestepped the arc of the scalding tea, stepping inside her guard. I grabbed her wrist with both hands and twisted it hard, applying vicious torque. She shrieked in agony as her fingers involuntarily spasmed open. The ceramic mug dropped, shattering spectacularly against the exposed brick wall. The pale yellow liquid exploded across the masonry, staining the gray grout and filling the hallway with the acrid stench of burned herbs and heavy metals. Before she could recover her balance or strike again, the heavy metal door of my loft was kicked open with a deafening, concussive crash that shook the floorboards. "NYPD! Drop to the floor! Do not move!" 4 plainclothes detectives flooded into the apartment, their service weapons drawn, gold badges flashing under the hallway lights. They moved with terrifying, coordinated precision. Behind them, a tall shadow detached itself from the dim corridor outside. Liam stepped into the loft, the collar of his black wool overcoat turned up against the autumn chill. He looked like an executioner arriving to survey the gallows, and beside him, standing at perfect, disciplined attention, was a massive, heavily muscled German shepherd. The highly trained security dog emitted a low, rumbling growl that literally vibrated through the floorboards. Its highly intelligent, amber eyes locked directly onto Vivian with predatory focus. Vivian screamed, a sound of absolute primal terror, dropping to her knees and throwing her hands into the air as the dog bared its teeth. "Vivian Carter," Detective James Miller barked, stepping forward. He holstered his weapon and pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Madeline Hayes, corporate espionage, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And frankly, considering we've been live recording pristine audio and video in this apartment for the last 4 hours, I'd highly recommend you exercise that right." Vivian sobbed hysterically, her body thrashing as Detective Miller wrenched her arms painfully behind her back. The sharp, metallic click-click of the handcuffs locking into place over her wrists was the single most beautiful symphony I had ever heard in my entire life. She twisted her neck, looking up at me through a tangled mess of hair and ruined mascara. Her eyes were wild, completely devoid of the calculating cunning she had always prided herself on. "Maddie! Maddie, please! It was a mistake! I'm sick! I need help! We're sisters! Please don't let them take me!" I walked slowly toward her, stopping just inches from where she kneeled on the floor, trembling beneath the watchful gaze of the German shepherd. I looked down at the pathetic broken woman who had once stood over my hospital bed, smirked at my flatlining monitor, and thanked me for dying. "Save your energy, sweetie," I whispered, echoing the exact words she had weaponized against me in the cold, sterile room of Mount Sinai. "You don't have much left." I turned my back on her as the detectives hauled her roughly to her feet and dragged her out of the apartment. Her screams echoed down the long hallway, growing fainter and fainter, until finally the heavy steel door clicked shut, leaving nothing but absolute silence. I stood in the hallway, staring at the shattered ceramic mug. I let out a long, shuddering breath, feeling the very last remnants of the poison, the trauma, and the paralyzing fear evaporate from my soul. Liam stepped forward, waving the dog back into a relaxed sit. He wrapped his strong arms around me, pulling me tight against his chest. His heartbeat was a steady, grounding drum against mine. I buried my face in his coat, breathing in the rich scent of cedar and the crisp autumn air. "It's finally over," he murmured, pressing a warm kiss to the top of my head. "You tore down the rotten foundation. Now, my brilliant architect, we build." 2 years later, May 2026. The grand reopening of the Waldorf Astoria was unequivocally the social event of the decade in New York City. The restored Art Deco lobby was a staggering masterpiece of modern engineering fused with historical reverence. It was bathed in the warm, golden glow of 1,000 imported crystal chandeliers, highlighting the flawless, high-tensile titanium load-bearing pillars that I had personally designed to support the massive, sweeping marble mezzanine. I stood at the top of the grand, sweeping staircase, wearing a bespoke, midnight blue silk gown that flowed like water. A flawless diamond ring, heavy and brilliant, rested on my left hand. As the founding lead partner at the newly minted Caldwell and Hayes Architectural Group, I was the undisputed queen of the evening. I looked down at the glittering crowd below. The absolute elite of New York, titans of real estate, finance, and culture, were there, raising their crystal flutes of champagne to my vision, my design, my triumph. Liam stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, smiling up at me with a profound adoration and fierce pride that still took my breath away. Miles away, in a maximum security women's correctional facility in upstate New York, Vivian was currently serving year 2 of a non-negotiable 45-year sentence for attempted murder, fraud, and corporate espionage. I had spoken with the prosecutor to ensure her placement. I made sure her concrete cell didn't have a window. I always knew she hated small spaces. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my vintage champagne. I was perfectly healthy. I was perfectly alive. And I was completely, utterly untouchable. I died once because I was too accommodating, too trusting, and too blind to the snakes hiding in my own garden. I was reborn by the grace of a universe that demanded a rebalancing of the scales. But I quickly learned that hard karma isn't a passive force. It doesn't just happen. Sometimes true justice requires an architect, and I designed my revenge flawlessly. If you think a toxic friend will magically change their ways, let my story be your ultimate wake-up call. Vivian truly believed she could play God with my life, effortlessly steal my legacy, and dance on my grave while cashing my life insurance check. But she severely underestimated the ruthless wrath of a woman who has already stared death in the face and clawed her way back to the land of the living. She is now rotting in a windowless concrete box for the rest of her natural life, while I am building a global multi-million-dollar empire alongside the incredible man she desperately tried to steal. Retribution is a dish best served absolutely freezing cold. Now it is your turn to speak up and expose the truth. Have you ever had a deeply toxic, manipulative best friend who smiled in your face while secretly trying to sabotage your hard-earned success, ruin your romantic relationships, or destroy your happiness? How did you finally catch them in their lies and deliver their karma? Drop your most intense, dramatic betrayal stories in the comments down below. I read and heart every single one of them. If my journey from a hospital bed to total domination satisfied your deep craving for absolute ruthless justice, you must smash that like button right now. It tells the algorithm to push this video to more people who need to hear this message. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you are the very first to know when I drop another unbelievable, high-stakes true story. Share this video immediately with anyone who needs a powerful reminder to trust their gut instincts, audit their inner circle, and never let anyone else hold the pen to their life story. Stay strong, stay fiercely vigilant, and I will see you in the next video.